Welcome, my dear friends. So today I have a huge gift for you as well as for me. I have the most amazing guest that I'm going to have the most amazing conversation with, and you are privy to this. And this is my dear friend, Dr. Tamara Beckford. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Beckford, and then I'll let her tell us more as we go along. So Dr. Tamara Beckford is an ER physician, and she's also an acclaimed international speaker, y'all. She is also the CEO of Your Caring Docs, and this is where she helps companies decrease employee burnout through self-care workshops. How cool is that? She also hosts the Dr. Tamara Beckford Show, where she interviews physicians about self-care, wellness, their activities inside and outside of medicine. So really exposing kind of the full dimensionality of physician lives. I love this so much. There's so many other things that you do, Dr. Beckford, which I'm so grateful for, and I'm so excited to watch this journey unfold for you. So would you tell us a little bit about how you came to this work from the spot of being an ER physician?
Oh, wow. Thank you. First, before I even delve deep into this, I have to really, really honor you, Rashmi, for having me on your wonderful show, and also to all of your audience. Dr. Rashmi was one of my first set of guests on my podcast and on my show. And, she did such an amazing treat to me. She was a treat to me and to my audience, and I hope that I can give her and you all the same. How did I get into what I am doing? I am an ER doctor, as you mentioned, and I'm actually here in Houston, Texas. During the time, during this little bug that's been going around called the pandemic. It was kind of like
Little thing.
deep, just this little thing that occurred in 2020 that kind of, took everyone for a tailspin. During that time, I've recognized certain things about my life. As an ER doc, that's really when if you're ever brought to the spotlight, highlighted in your career, that was when it was for me as an ER doctor. Prior to all of that, I kind of was in an era that I can now look back and realize that I was kind of in a funk in life, thinking of what is it that I can contribute to life. During different phases, I thought maybe when this happened, then I'll feel fulfilled, such as maybe my fulfillment is that, maybe I need a family. I've always wanted a family. Maybe it's because I'm having challenge starting a family. Have these wonderful two lovely boys, still my heart outside of my body. But there was still something missing. And of course, as a parent, you might want to feel awkward, saying like, why do I not feel completely whole in that, I have this family that I've wanted, but when the pandemic came around, I started to thrive. And it's like, why am I thriving during a time of despair for others? And so I had to really dig deep in and figure out what is it that I was doing when this happened. As the pandemic came around, I had to really change how I was conducting my life, right? So there are certain things that I started to make a little bit more paramount that I really wasn't doing prior. And a lot of that was self-care. I looked back and I said, okay, I started to really tap into a routine. And I call this, some people might call it a morning routine because I work nights, so I don't really call it a morning. I call it a wake up routine. I tapped into that. I tapped into a community of people who were positive, uplifting, and they also felt this void, but together we no longer felt a void, which was very interesting. And we also all wanted to change the world. We had these dreams of being a bigger impact on the world than where we were at the time. And lo and behold, all of this started to bring fulfillment and also a momentum of change that I can bring this type of energy to others. I've seen the way it's impacted me. I've seen the way it's impacted myself. When I look at my colleagues, they have a different fate than I do. I am thriving, but they're riddled with anxiety. They're riddled with a lot of negative emotions. And, but for me, I'm having the opposite. So that's when I said, there's a power within this thing called self-care. And it'll be very, very unfortunate for me as a person to hold this back. So I became a champion for it. I said self-care is just as important to the individual as it is to those who are around them. And that's when I really got deeper into this journey.
Wow, what a beautiful story. I love that. And right, so you were thrust into literally probably one of the most challenging situations as an ER physician during COVID, during the height of hopefully the only pandemic that we'll see in our lifetimes. But
Hopefully.
we don't know. And
Mhm.
you intuitively turned inward and you said, how can I help myself? Which
Mhm.
wasn't, so you really went against the grain when you were doing
Yes.
something like that. And
Mhm.
so what I'm hearing is you intuitively began to look inward and you really tapped into this empowerment that you didn't know was there. And until this crisis hit, you were doing what we all are taught to do, are conditioned to do, which is to rearrange our external circumstances to find fulfillment. And
Absolutely.
there was no way you could rearrange that external circumstance. So then what you did was you started to look inward and
Mhm.
you hit some gold. And you
Yes.
did that with self-care. You did that with connection. We know how important it is for
Mhm.
connection and community. And so that's really what you're bringing to other physicians, to these companies. And
Mhm.
this is, something that I can't imagine a more important topic or a more important time for us to be talking about why self-care. And you just said it so beautifully. And I
Mhm.
joke that, all through like med school residency and, certainly being an attending, and when my kids were little, it was like literally like years and years after that when I heard the word or the term self-care, and I was like, what is that? And
Mhm.
so my goodness, how far we've come from being able to talk about it to, in generations past, that being our default way of being was taking care of ourselves. So I
Absolutely.
absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing. So what I'm wondering is, I know
Mhm.
you've talked to literally hundreds and hundreds of physicians over the
Mhm.
last couple of years, and I love listening to the interviews. And you really bring out so much wisdom in really everyone that you speak to. What wisdom would you say you've gleaned as to where we are and where you think we're headed?
You know, as you mentioned, I have spoken to many, almost at this particular recording, I'm almost at 180 interviews. And and one of the things that I can really say with a lot of the physicians who have gone through this journey, there are many of us who are dealing with this burnout, stress within our careers. This is a time where there's a lot of change going on in healthcare. And a lot of physicians have decided, I'm going to do this my way. And before, they felt helpless. So I will say that there was a lot of despair that was going on. And right now, there's a lot of power that physicians are taking back into their realm. But for them to really take this power first, they had to recognize that they had the power. And a lot of us, when you are deep into feeling burned out, when you're deep into feeling deflated, demoralized, you do not remember that you are a powerful person, that what you do matter. And it doesn't just matter on the level of the patient, it matters in the system overall. So recognizing that has been so beautiful in watching my colleagues during our interview. And then also is another thing that there's so much connection that I see in almost every interview in what the person did as a child, what they wanted to do as a child, what their hopes and dreams were for their lives. And even if they didn't say medicine initially, they are doing exactly what they wanted. And it's always powerful to see this. So, someone might have wanted to be a superhero. Someone said, I remember reading this book of this young girl, and she had this cape. And then, they went through life. And then now the way that they're that physician is helping others, they're looked on as a superhero. So I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. You know, as a child, you read this book about superheroes, and now you are a superhero, but you're not looking at yourself as that. You know, we have those who wanted to build things, and they're like, oh, I built this with my, I was just fascinated with that. And then now that person is doing like cardiothoracic surgery and they're reconstructing heart. And I'm saying, you're doing the same thing, but it's in a different realm, and you're having a huge impact on life. So there's a lot of changes that we go through as physicians, but a lot of it's really just full circle. But during that phase, there are a lot of times we lose the power that we have. So once we recognize that we still have all that power within, then I see the lights come back. Then I see the shimmer of hope. That's when I see the power, as I said, almost like the tsunami that's rising. That for those who are listening, if you are not feeling this power, I'm telling you, within the next, I don't even think it's going to take 5 years for this tsunami of power of physicians that you will see out there that are making this enormous change in healthcare. And they're doing it for the betterment, not only of their patients, but also for themselves. So
Ooh,
I'm
I love
just saying the
that.
front for it.
Ooh, I love it. I'm here for all of it. I
Me
am here for
too.
all of it. And I love how you notice that there's really, most of us are having kind of these full circle moments, and how we're finding that our expression of helping others heal really stems from certain things that we may have noticed or been attracted to as children, and certainly as we were growing up. Absolutely. And how that expression for every physician looks very different.
Oh yeah.
And that there are circumstances that can be overcome, meaning when we are used as commodities, which certainly physicians for years, and it has gotten so much worse, which is why the burnout rate is so much higher, are used as commodities, whether it's private equity or a large hospital system, whatever it is, we are treated as just, kind of a pawn. And so is the patient, unfortunately, from all the things that I've seen. And so what you're seeing is we're saying we're done. We're changing the narrative here. And this is not the only way to practice medicine. And this is not the only way to give and receive care in this country. And that takes some time, but you're seeing a tsunami come, and we just better get ready for it, because it's going to be fun.
Better get ready.
Yeah.
It's really on its way. And the power that's there, it's just fascinating to see, because I think from the outside, a lot of those who are witnessing this from a spectator standpoint, you're not actively in medicine, you might wonder, like, why is it that my physician is doing this? And then, but the physicians are really trying to take back the power so that they can give it all to you. And for that connection between you and your doctor has no intermediary. It's a full-blown, you and I are sitting and we're working on this together. I believe that this will be the best for you. And then we're not having an insider saying, well, I don't think I want to approve this. It's you and I together. So it's beautiful to watch. Rest assured, yes, there are going to be kinks, but to just see how much power and care and love is coming back into this direct relationship, it's beautiful.
It really is. I love that. And it all kind of starts with looking inward in a way.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And it all starts with some amount of untethering from external expectations or even internal expectations, kind of like you did. So for somebody who's listening or watching and they're saying, look, it's all well and good, y'all have time for self-care, but I don't have any time. What would you say to anyone who says, I just don't have the time for self-care?
It's I would say, number one, I understand the mind of that, because your mind will always want to stay in a path of what is considered the least resistance. Stepping into self-care is your mind having to actively work, and it does not want to. However, once you tap into that part, it won't want to stop. So, what are some really easy ways for you to step into self care? I'd say one is bringing yourself right back to that point. We talk about that point as children. There were things that we loved to do as a kid. And I always tell people, think about your 7 or 8 year old like self. I think at that point, you're kind of like, life is still grand. You're not an adult, you're not a teenager, you're not so much as a baby, but you found certain things that you like and you found things that you didn't like. And there are things that you've come into your own, and there are little activities that you just loved. Like I loved to read. And I forgot that I loved to read. Why? Because my reading stopped being pleasurable. It was all towards a goal. I had to read this journal or this book. There were some people love to paint. Some people love making things with their hands. Now, when we talk about self-care, that's what we're talking about, bringing yourself back to the essence of things you love to do that just made you feel good on the inside. So self-care doesn't really mean that you're starting off on this long running journey. It doesn't mean that you're starting off by making spa appointments every 2 weeks. No, self-care is what is the essence of you? What made you feel at your best when you're at your core? That's where you start, because your mind will tap into that part. It will want to find it. So you start there and then you work your way out. So once you start and remember that essence, for me, is what made Tamara. I love a little quiet time, love to be able to read. So when things are chaotic around me, I look forward to my quiet time. My husband recognizes that. And so, he allows me to have that little quiet time. And I feel so good from there. And then I work from there, quiet to gratitude to, meditating, yoga. And I learned from Rashmi that meditation is okay if my mind goes wild. I just take her time and bring her back. And all this just empowers me. And that's how you should feel at the end of self-care. You should feel empowered. You should not feel like it's daunting. If it is, that's not your self-care. So that's where I start.
Ooh, mic drop, mic drop. That's beautiful, right? So start small and start with something that brings you immediate feedback right then and there. So if it's, painting, if it's drawing, if it's reading, if it's riding your bike, whatever it is, giving yourself permission to do that for a short while. And making it fairly consistent. It'd be great if we could go to the spa every 2 weeks, but that's not really realistic for most people that I know. And so really creating space within a busy life to have these practices be incorporated, not as a one-off, but actually incorporating that into life. And that's really where you start to see the results. I love that. I love that. And I really appreciate you taking us through the process of how you work through when things are chaotic and the permissions that you give yourself. And, whether it's a spoken or unspoken contract that we have with our partners and with the people who are around us. Like my kids are older, they're 18 and 16. And so they do cooking and cleaning, and they drive and they bring the groceries and they do all kinds of other things, and they give me space. And so it's really like, it's almost like you kind of like increase the amount of people that you can give and receive from once the kids start to get older. And I just love that idea too, of modeling it for the people around us as well, and giving them permission to have their own self-care. It's amazing.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh, this has been the most phenomenal conversation, Dr. Beckford. I know people are going to want to find you. So can you help us find you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am on LinkedIn all day, almost every day. And I do have a Self-Care Sundays newsletter on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Tamara Beckford, MD on LinkedIn. And all of this is also available on my website, yourcaringdocs.com. That's URCARINGDOCS.com. With there, you'll find masterclasses that we have that are free. You can register for those. You can register for newsletters. And also, if you'd like to book me as a speaker for your event or an MC, posts. You can do all of that through this wonderful website. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I did not say that my wonderful podcast, where Dr. Rashmi Shram, her interview is also available there on that website. So you can see all of that on earcareanddocs.com.
It's such an amazing set of tools that you've built, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to have spent this time together with you. Any last parting words for anyone who's listening?
I would say that self-care, the purpose and the intention of it is really a strength building tool. So it builds the strength not just for the individual, but the strength extends outward to the community. And that's one of my reasons why I'm so passionate about self-care, because a lot of the time we hear the word self-care and we think it's only for us, but it really builds the individual. And then the individual ends up building the community. So that's one of the additional powers of self-care.
Oh, I love that, which is the exact reason why it is not selfish.
Absolutely.
And we're actually lifting others up when we lift our own selves up. Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh, just absolute gold. Thank you so much, Dr. Beckford.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.